Welcome to the show from the NZNO, the New Zealand Nurses Organisation, the President, Anne Daniels. Anne, thank you for joining us today.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Anne.
Do we need to have any kind of official curtsy or anything for having the President on, El Presidente? Do we need to do anything to acknowledge your presence?
No, but some of my colleagues in the ED sometimes do a backwards salute, so I'm not sure what that's about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's about either. Gosh. All right. This is what we're going to do. We want to get your, you're obviously Dunedin-based as well, and you've known Chewie from the odd protest here or there. Wouldn't mind getting some of your thoughts and feelings around what's happening in the health system at the moment in general. But there's something I heard today that I really would like you to speak to. So all of us are going to travel through time to about 13 hours ago when Mr. Mike Hosking was talking to Mr. Christopher Luxon about nurses. And when they start talking about how much nurses get paid, I have this nerve in the back of my neck. I call it my bullshit nerve. And my bullshit nerve went, but of course, I don't have the information, but you do. So let's have a listen to this conversation first, and then we'll get some information from you about their claim around nurses, because they make it sound like these nurses are all just whinging because they're on such a good wicket. That's the general vibe of this conversation. Here we go.
You put 17 billion into this, 2,000 extra nurses, and per head you're going backwards. What's the problem?
It's an insanely complex organisation. So, there's this narrative out there that we're cutting healthcare services. Absolute total rubbish. We're putting 17 billion more on top of the 28 billion that already goes in. The second thing is, if you just take nurses, people say, oh, we're cutting nurses. No, we're not. We've actually added 2,000 nurses in 1 year. Nurses pays up 70% since 2014.
That number you gave yesterday, that's true. $127,000.
$127,000, including overtime allowances.
That's good money. You
South
can't
Wales.
argue with that, can you?
That's the point I'm trying to make, is that, the narrative, and people need to understand. And let's be clear, we're up against unions, and we're up against people who are trying to say everything we're doing is rubbish in healthcare, and it's just not true. When we've actually increased remuneration for nurses to 127,000, including their allowances, including overtime, that is on a comparable level to what you'd get in New South Wales, and yet New South Wales is 35% richer than us. So, there is some good progress made on workforce recruitment and remuneration. There's good progress on funding. There's plenty of money in the system, but we're not getting the results, and we're not getting what patients want or need. So,
right. Is Levy doing that for you? Is this where Brown comes in, and Brown doesn't have faith in Levy or whatever the case? I mean, is this being fixed or not? Because at the end of the day, we all want good health, but there's got to be a limit. I think you're right. At $30 billion in total. I mean, how much is it? I mean, it can't be a bottomless pit.
No, but there's enough. What I'm trying to say,
unlike reimbursements to landlords and tax breaks, that can be bottomless. Sorry, I digress.
With those things I announced yesterday in my opening remarks, was to get people to understand there is enough money. There is actually progress on the workforce front. That's pretty impressive. And actually the issue is a system that's actually grossly bureaucratic and highly inefficient. And so putting Lester Levy in as a commissioner has been very important. We've obviously got changes of the CEOs and the Director General of Ministry of Health. That's really important. But we now want this organisation focused on patients. We want everything to be patient first. And so you can talk about the money, you can talk about remuneration, you can talk with unions as much as you like, but at the end of the day, the New Zealanders need to get access to doctors. They need to be able to see faster wait times for first surgeries, for first specialist appointments, for emergency departments. Those things are the things that matter. So let's make the organisation focus on customers or patients, which I think is, I know some of the media can be customer, but I don't care. I mean, these are service organisations that need to deliver for patients and for customers and for Kiwis. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, I don't mind the idea about using customers for patients, Chewie, because then we get to say to him around school lunches, how are you treating those customers? But that's another conversation for another day. And a couple of claims they made. They are not cutting healthcare. They are injecting $17 billion more, and they've employed 2,000 new nurses this year. Before we get to the money, how do those three statements fit with your reality?
They're not cutting nurses. That's, as he politely put it, absolute rubbish. I've been meeting with the chairs and the leaders of the colleges and sections in the NZNO today, and there were tears in the room because of the shared stories of the horrendous cuts, vacancies not being filled, and the impact on the patients that we're actually caring for, because we just simply do not have enough nurses to provide the timely standard of care that we should be doing. One nurse who was representing the NICU to look after the tiny babies said that she turned up to shift the other day, 5 nurses down. Now, they get sent nurses, but these nurses have never worked in NICU. They have no idea what to do, and it doubles these experienced expert nurses' workload when they're already 5 nurses down. And what does that mean? That's really impacting on the patients, and things are starting to go wrong. People are getting hurt and harmed because of it.
Are you guys just being big meanies to the Prime Minister? Because he said he's up against the unions and like that everyone's believing your narrative. Are you just being a bit nasty to him?
I don't think it's in any nurse's DNA to be nasty to anybody, quite the opposite, to be perfectly frank. And if he uses language about being up against us, I don't know how he can say that, because he never sees us, never talks to us. No, it's not happening. We're not even in the room. So he's sounding pretty pressured and worried and concerned. And I think that he is under pressure because he knows that the health system, the cost of a living, are the two big main worries in this nation. And the recent PSA survey made that very, very clear.
Right, let's get to not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I wanted to get you. Apparently, nurses on a pretty good wicket, $127,000. Is that true?
No, it's not. So, I'm an expert nurse. I work to the top of my scope in the emergency department when I actually pick up shifts casually. And let me say, my texts go off 3 to 5 times a day. And the words desperate, any hours, overtime are words that are used consistently for people to actually come in and help, because our patients are sicker. We don't have the gaps filled. It is just horrendous. So as the top of my scope, I am on 106,000 a year. Okay, so that's a full-time nurse in the hospital sector. If I was to get 127,000, I'd be one of the rare breed of clinical nurse managers or nurse practitioners. But they would have to actually do a lot of hours to actually get that.
So it'd be unlikely that it'd be on 127K for a 40-hour week, say.
Absolutely not.
He did say overtime, and he did say that was a part of overtime and any allowances. But are we what are we talking about? What kind of overtime? Is it like 20 days in a row overtime, or like what would get us to 127 out of interest? Because he's making it sound like that's what everyone's on.
Yeah. I'm really, really glad that you asked that question. So we did a few numbers, and we found that to get that, a nurse who's working full time would have to work 32 times 8-hour shifts, or one extra day every fortnight of overtime to actually get the kind of money that he's talking about. So this means that nurse is working 11-hour shifts, or one day extra a fortnight over the 80 hours. It means that nurse is tired and probably burnt out because of the horrendous hours they're doing. And if they're doing that, it actually shows how desperate our hospital system is to actually ensure that care is given in a timely way. And we know it's not. In the emergency department, 2/3 of the patients that turn up do not get seen within their triage times.
When you say 11 hours a day, what contract, what number of days per week? Is it a 5-day contract? Is it a 6-day contract?
Well, that can vary depending on which area you work in.
Right.
But in ED and in the wards, generally it's an 8-hour day. So that's an extra 3.5 odd hours on top of your normal contracted time. And as I said, we get texts all day long asking for people to come in. So, if we've got enough nurses in the system, and if they have recruited those nurses, and maybe they have, but they have gone. And we know they've gone because I've actually looked up the number of nurses that have registered to go and work in Australia, if you're interested.
I think we'd be bloody interested in that, to be honest with you, Anne.
Okay, well, in 2023 and 24, 12,000 New Zealand nurses registered to go and work in Australia, and that was a 53% increase from the year before. In 24-25, 19,600 registered to go to work in Australia.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Was
I
that
think there's
19,119?
91,600.
Wow.
So we've lost. Hang on, that means we've lost more than 30,000 nurses, because 12 plus 19 is 31.
Yeah. When I will qualify my statement. When I say registered to work, that means they have actually made the decision to go through all the paperwork and the processes to register so they can hop over the ditch and work if they choose to. The government doesn't actually collect the information about how many nurses do leave. But I know they're leaving because they can't get jobs.
So to just go back one half step to the 127,000, what you're saying is approximately, to make $127,000, you would have to approximately work 1.5 shifts, because 8 plus 3.5 gets you to that 11
That's
hours.
correct.
So you'd have to basically work your normal full-time job, but rather than a shift, every shift would have to be approximately 1.5 times the length, and that would get you to somewhere in that 127K mark.
That is correct. And that is something the New Zealand Nurses Organisation, in fact, the research internationally and nationally state that if you work over 10 hours in a shift, you become so tired that you're more than likely to make a mistake. And that's when patients get harmed.
Chewie, you've done some work on this today. Do you want to jump in and share your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I saw that comment that basically just dangled the line out there that Luxon made it sound like most nurses were on easy 127,000, don't even worry about it. What a great job, great remuneration, all of that sort of thing. I reached out to a nurse that I know, and I mentioned this comment, and the noises that were made sounded like some sort of predator stuck in a drain pipe. It was rage. It was very, very primal. She did not agree. She gave me her pay band, which was very close to what you mentioned. And I asked her the question, what extra work, extra responsibility, extra hours would you need to do to get to this 127,000? And she said, I would have to do so much work that I would be useless and dangerous to people, which very much echoes what you're saying there. It's to be so blasé, so cavalier by mentioning people's pay band or supposed pay band. I think he's looked at a number that someone's pulled up of like, well, here's our highest paid nurse. And he's gone, got it. All nurses get that. Right, onto the radio. Without any sort of understanding. And I think this really plays to how Luxon looks at people in these sort of jobs, is he will only look at the managers, the people at the top of the field. He won't look at the averages. He won't look at what the majority of people get. And he has little to no understanding of what a hard job this is. I don't think there's anybody in the country that would go, nurses have it too easy. Look at them in their cushy job and their big fat wallets. The nurse that I spoke to, and I mentioned this a couple of times, is constantly stuck in this position of not only getting those text messages that you mentioned, can you come in? Can you come in? Urgent, help, panic. But is also getting emails of, you have too much leave, you need to take leave. Leave request denied.
Yeah.
How long do people have to put up with this?
My husband was a nurse. He retired recently. He had so much leave that he was able to continue to be on the payroll for over 3 months before he actually finished work. That's how much leave he had owing to him. But getting back to the 127,000, it's actually worse than we've been focusing on the hospital nurses. So he said the average nurse. In primary healthcare, a registered nurse at the top of her scope will only get $90,000 a year, which is 18% less than a registered nurse working in the hospital. And that disparity is actually causing major issues in primary healthcare because the GPs are unable to actually be competitive to keep registered nurses in primary healthcare, which is where we need to keep them so that we can keep people well so they don't come into hospitals. The Prime Minister also mentioned the New South Wales. Now, the New South Wales state is the lowest paid state in the whole of Australia. And it's so badly paid. They have been on strike constantly for I don't know how long, but quite some time. And they are basically got a prime minister who's broken his promise to the nurses as well. So the New South Wales is not a good state for them to, for him to have compared. He should have tried Victoria or Queensland, who are much better paid than New Zealand nurses. And guess where our New Zealand nurses are going?
But that wouldn't maybe have suited his narrative quite so much. Hey, Anne, just before we say goodbye and thanks to you, current negotiations, where are we at? What's happening between nurses and the government at the moment?
I am so glad you asked that question. Why do you think Prime Minister Luxon said what he said? Because we are in the middle of negotiations. He's offered 0 to 1%, 1% being top over 2 years. Now, that's a pay cut in any shape or form. But the main claim that we have in our negotiations is, guess what? Safe staffing. We need enough nurses. We are begging. The nurses are begging for more nurses so that we can provide the care to the patients that they deserve and need. And we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not thinking about pay. We're wanting more of us to actually provide the care and do it sooner and so that people don't suffer any harm. And it is just absolutely horrible. So, he's completely wrong on...
When Mr. Luxon says patient first, actually working with the nurses and getting this sorted out is actually patient first, but he's selling it as the nurses are taking us away from being able to focus on the patients, but actually helping the nurses is exactly what the patients need.
That is our biggest claim. We want legislated nurse-patient ratios that is culturally appropriate. That means being able to give time to the people that we're caring for, hear their voices and their stories so that we can get the care that they need right. But we don't have time for that. We're just running. Most nurses do about 15,000 steps in an 8-hour period. And I tell you, your legs are aching, your head's aching, and all you want to do is lie down and sleep. That is not what most people do when they've finished a shift. Yeah. There was a time 15 years ago that I could go home and go for a 10K run. Can't do it now. Not because I'm too old and too fat. But I wouldn't even dream of it because I'm too tired.
Yeah. Well, Anne, it's spectacular you giving us some of your time. Really do appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on board. We obviously want to stay over this, so please stay in touch. We will stay in touch with you and your team and your other supporters. As I said earlier, I messaged 2 or 3 of the sort of unions, and they all came back to me and they said, Anne got in first, so we're talking to Anne. But it's even though you may be different unions or different organisations, everyone's speaking with one voice as to what the nurses need and what the government needs to do. So thanks for your time today.
Yeah, all the unions are in exactly the same space. And at some stage, it would be great to talk about the hospital and the outpatient building as well. Okay, take care.
All right, thanks, Anne. All the best.
Cheers, Anne.